Well, this is the canvas I'm going to use. I bought some stretcher frames. I used to make my own, but I buy them now. It's much simpler and they're quite inexpensive. When I stretch my canvas, I put it on at the top here. I put about 3 staples in here. Staple that. I flip the canvas over, put 3 more staples on this side. And then I work my way around, put 3 more staples on this side, flip it once again. This way it keeps it square. If I were to pull too much on one side of the canvas, it might get it off center a little bit. It's also important to use a square like this. Been many times where I've stretched the canvas only to find out that it's crooked. So after I put the bars together, I always check the squareness of this, and I keep checking it as I staple it. Just using a staple gun. And then I'm using some canvas pliers. These are very good. They're a little pricey, but if you stretch a lot of canvas, these are really an excellent thing to have. After I've got this all stapled in place, take a razor blade and just trim along these edges, get off the excess canvas. Once I have all the canvas stapled down, I have to finish off these edges. So I take one edge, fold it under, and lay this on top. It gives me a nice square edge along here. Then I staple this. This canvas is pretty tight, but if it were a little bit loose, it's not in this case because I just stretched it, I can take a little atomizer, spray the back of it, or I can take a sponge and use some water sparingly, and that will shrink this canvas up, tighten it up again. This canvas has come pre-primed with gesso, so I see no need on putting more gesso on the surface of this, but I do want some texture on this particular painting I'm going to do. And I don't use this very often, but I'm going to use it this time. It's called modeling paste. It's basically marble dust mixed with polymer, which is a plastic solution that bonds everything together. And this modeling paste, I've used it for decades, and I have some paintings that are maybe 20 years old, and this has held up very good. It hasn't cracked in all 20 years as I've looked back on some of these paintings. So I'm going to take this outside now and coat this with a little marble dust to give this canvas some texture, so when I put my acrylic paints on this, I'll have a nice textural base. I've got my modeling paste. I've got an old brush, just an inexpensive brush. This stuff is very thick, so I'm going to just scrub it around. And if it's a little thicker than I want it, I can take a little bit of gesso, just mix a little bit of gesso with this on the canvas, thins it out just a little bit if I find it's too thick. This dries fairly quickly, but not fast enough where I don't have time to work with it. So after I get a little bit of this put on here, I'll just lighten the touch of my brush and smooth this out. I don't want a lot of texture on there, just a little bit, and this will do the trick. This will often help a large painting like this, because if I use thinner paints to start with, when I put them on there, all those thin paints will sort of run into the grooves and crevices of this texture and create some interesting effects. Since the main ingredient here is marble dust, and after I've put this on, if I've discovered that once it's dry I have a little bit too much texture on my canvas, I can just take some sandpaper and sand this off just a little bit. Well, there I have it. It's all finished. Let it dry a few minutes, and this is ready to go. I brought this canvas up to the studio, and I'm going to do one last thing to it. Here I'm using some burnt sienna, burnt umber, a damp rag, and my atomizer to get the canvas quite wet. I continue this process a little bit at a time until I cover the entire canvas. These colors will give me a nice warm tone on which to start the painting, and the thin paint shows up nicely with the textures that have been created with the modeling paste. This only takes a few minutes, and the canvas is ready to start applying some real paint.